I could not process. I couldn't even go that way. That something there might be an issue with our son. And to me, every interaction matters. All that's therapy.
You talk about the importance of mental toughness.
We are taught you never give up. If you're truly a father, you jump on board and help your spouse and do everything you can to help that child. If you're listening to this today and you just received a diagnosis, I have been in your shoes. I understand it.
Welcome back to another episode of Get UnPuzzled, the podcast where we break down barriers, connect families, and bring real, honest conversations to the autism and disability community. I'm your host, Whitney Price, and today I'm joined by a father who knows firsthand how important it is to continue fighting for progress for your child. Harry Psaros is a father who has turned his family's journey with autism into a mission of advocacy, awareness, and hope. He's here to share the lessons that he's learned and also his new book, From Struggle to Strength, a book that captures the heart of his journey and the message that he carries forward to families like ours. If you know someone who is struggling to accept their child's diagnosis, do me a favor and send them this episode. Harry's story is a powerful reminder that even in the hardest moments, hope and strength are possible. Let's dive in. Harry, thank you so much for being here with us today. I am excited for our listeners to hear about you, your book, and also your son Gus and the journey that you guys have gone through. And just so our listeners have a better understanding, can you take us all the way back to when he was first diagnosed and all of those emotions that you had felt and that you dealt with?
Sure. I mean, when you're a new parent, you know what you know. So I obviously, Gus, Costa is his Greek name. We call him Gus, was our first son. I had nothing to compare him to. But my wife, to her credit, was around other children his age, kind of going around to the doctor's appointments and noticing deficits. He wasn't speaking. She would leave him with my parents and he just didn't care. He wouldn't even look towards her. We start picking up on things and then you would place him next to his peers and she started noticing significant differences. So she continually was trying to tell me, I think he might be on the spectrum. My thought was, you're out of your mind. And I state this in the book, but I'm kind of a crazy type A personality myself. I joke around, I say I can have fun at an insurance seminar. So it was hard for me to fathom that my son would have something that would impair him socially. It just nothing resonated with me. The straw that broke the camel's back was Miss Josie, who's a hero in my book, who was a preschool teacher. There was a birthday party, all of them were there. And I say this in the keynote speeches I deliver. The children were physically there and involved in the party. My son was there, but he wasn't there. He walked in, he saw a spinning fan. He was obsessed with hinges and fans. He immediately started what we know now is stimming, and he was bongo drumming, and he wouldn't go near the kids or the cake. And that's when Miss Josie grabbed my wife and said, listen, I really think I love you. I love Harry, but I think Gus is on the autism spectrum. Where we lucked out, we actually, believe it or not, had a close family member working in the autism center at the Cleveland Clinic. So as opposed to a 6 to 8 month agonizing wait, and it could have been longer, we were in 2 weeks. And so what my wife dealt with was semi belittling pediatricians, which I know a lot of people listening to your podcast can understand with. She had to fight through that. She had to fight through this guy who was belligerent. I don't want to say mocking, more angry, because I kept thinking, why do you want to label our son? I just don't understand why you want to do it. That was a seminal moment from the party, going up to Cleveland, getting the diagnosis. And I can't speak for every father, every parent. Everybody goes through waves of emotion at that time. the two critical hours for me were the 2 hours driving back from Cleveland to Pittsburgh. The first hour was that angst, the depression, the anger, all of that amalgam that you throw together, and I was just trying to deal with it. The second hour, when we hit, I went into a hyperadrenal. I still remember to this day. Like and it's pretty prevalent in my book. I boxed. I'm a martial artist, and when you get in the ring, you get those goosebumps going. I felt that, and I flipped to. I was very resolute. I said, okay, if my son has this, I want him to be the anomaly. When I say the anomaly, I'm going to do everything I can to support this child. I owe my wife an apology, and I want to get on board and help her. And I want him to be successful and live a good life. And I didn't know what that life looked like. I wanted to optimize my son. I wanted to make sure we would do everything possible to find every modality to help him. And I truly believe, we've done that. And the fact that at the moment he'll be a senior at Kent State University a year from now getting his degree, I think is testament to our hard work and perseverance.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt in my mind. That's a success story if I've ever heard one. So it's absolutely a true testament. Can you talk about some of the signs that your wife saw and that you saw that kind of led you to believe or have that validation that, okay, this really could be autism?
Sure. Well, first was the significant speech delay. And I know a lot of people, as they say this, will be nodding their head. They've gone through this. Again, my wife noticed that she would drop him off again, like I said, with my parents. And it was like, okay, go, mom. Like, some children want to cling to their mother or say bye or things like that. Then, the obvious, which was the social cues. She might be at a park or go elsewhere, and there'd be peers his age, and he simply wouldn't interact with them. Or if they tried to interact with them, it was very, he would really retort or speak with them. So we start seeing these differences. The other thing, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, you would hand him a car, and most kids would move the car back and forth, right? He would flip it over and spin the wheels and play with the wheels. He was obsessed with hinges, fans, wheels. And when I say obsessed, and again, I know a lot of people can relate to what I'm saying. He could stare for hours at a wheel spinning. So all of these things tipped her off. She kept looking and going, this can't be real. And I should give her credit too. Oprah Winfrey, in conjunction with Autism Speaks, had a very large autism special. That special she watched, and they were listing some of the characteristics. And not to mention, too, I should throw this in. We saw the traditional hand flapping, but all of those together, she knew something was wrong. And I don't know what it was in my brain, but I could not process. I couldn't even go that way. That there might be an issue with our son. But once it was just getting those outside sources validating the preschool teacher, the neurologist, and I realized I really need to get on board. If you're truly a father, you jump on board and help your spouse and do everything you can. And the term I like to use is unrelenting love. Do everything you can to help that child.
Definitely. I definitely agree. And jumping back to the spinning of the wheels, when we went to pick our son up at daycare right before the pandemic hit, we found out that he was not allowed to play in those big, almost Flintstone looking like cars that you get in and you sit and you spin or you drive them, because he was flipping them over. And just, they said that he would spend hours the entire session just spinning the wheels. And that was one of my first, I guess, realizations of that's different, that's odd. But at the same time, I pushed it aside. And because they blend in so well when they're that little and they're very impressionable, they're cute, they're just innocent, and they don't have all those skills, or no one has the coping skills at that age. And they're all a little I guess, different in their own way. But I could see, and I have seen so many other families that have gone, yeah, but there's other kids that do this. Now, looking back, there are two other kids in his daycare class that were also diagnosed with autism that
Oh,
had
wow.
such similar, yeah, similarities. Um, but it just, yeah, that the spinning of the wheels really hits me because that is one of the biggest things that I remember seeing as a mom and going, well, every kid likes cars, or at least every kid in that class or that we knew of, the little boys loved cars, but he loved them in such a different way that, we didn't care about the Hot Wheel tracks. We only cared about flipping the cars over or spinning them on the tile. And like you said, with the fans, we still to this day say that Connor has his fans in the house that he can just relax and look at for hours and hours. Or the little mobiles when he was little or an infant. And yeah, we thought, okay, when is he going to stop liking just to look at the fans or be obsessed and mesmerized by bubbles? And so it's amazing the things that you look back on and realize that all of our kids have these very specific similarities. But
It's funny you say that. We toiled with the idea of putting a fan in his room because he kept requesting it. But on the flip side, one smart move we made, and if any parent listening to this, I would take note. We built the largest swing set, play set. It was massive. I can't think of the brand, but it was huge in the backyard, and it attracted all of the kids. So my fear, and I talked to my wife about this. I said if we put a fan in his room, I could see him sitting for hours just staring at it. So instead, we opted not to do that, and we would push him outside, with his brother Max, and he would be playing with up to 12 kids at a time in our backyard. And to me, every interaction matters. All that's therapy. So we toiled with the fan in the room. We did. But my fear was he would just stare for hours on end. So it's tough. But you're right though. The similarities are crazy.
right. Now, what about mindset? I know your book is very inspirational and motivational, but you talk about the importance of mental toughness. How has this mindset impacted your personal journey and your son's progress?
In terms of mindset, I come with a martial arts background, and we are taught you never give up. You don't give up. If you're knocked down, you get back up and you reevaluate very quickly, and then you attack. And that was the same mindset I brought. My thought from day one, raising my son, was I want to look into, when I say modalities, I want to be specific, what foods are affecting his brain. What supplements can we do? What therapies will help? And then I kept looking outside the box. And if in what I talk about in my book, and I brought up one specific a topic in the chapter, we had I read a book with a controversial title. I'll just leave it at that. It's a New York Times bestseller on autism, written by a West Coast physician, and it was during COVID. And I was cleaning my study that it's behind me right now. I have hundreds of books, and I dusted it off and I read it 3 times. And I go, we got to go with this guy. This is I think he has a revolutionary way of looking at autism. And keep in mind, my son at the time was starting to really proficiently do well in class on his own, starting to advocate a little bit for himself. But I said, this might be an X factor. It turned out to be a wildly expensive disaster. I found the doctor to be a little unhinged. He started my son on an SSRI, which made him gain like 20 pounds. And at that point, we said, enough. We would call, and he was more obsessed with yelling about the presidential election than he was focused on my son. We had a failure. We didn't stop there. You always look. And I want to emphasize to anyone listening to this, my son has autism. It's part of his DNA, and I love every bit of him. I'm not trying to change who he is as a person. What I want to do is optimize the person he can be. So I want to make sure to make that very specific. I'm not trying to whitewash autism. I'm simply trying to get him in a position where he may be able to thrive in life on his own because I'm not always going to be here. So my message, anyone listening to this, is don't give up. And I'm not saying spend hours upon hours every minute looking, but what I'm finding is there are new effective treatments, and you never know which one is just going to click. We've had some that haven't, we've had some that have, but the point is you keep looking to help your child.
Let's talk about therapies. What about in the very beginning? What types of therapies did you guys push for? What worked for him? What did you find that didn't work for him? Kind of walk me through that beginning process.
So the first thing we wanted to tackle was getting him well, building his immune system up, starting the multivitamin, things like that. Then they started, and I apologize for all the terminology. It might be old, but we had like behavioral modification therapy, right? So we had the therapist that would come in the morning, midday, about every other week, we would have a supervisor stop by around lunch. Then we'd have the therapist coming in the afternoon. On top of that, we had feeding therapy. Gus was addicted to the beige diet, which I think, again, I always say everybody's nodding their head when I'm talking. So we had to therefore go, and there's a cute story in my book. Um, one of the great rapport items I have with my older son Gus, we both love sushi. But at the time, we were told, hey, listen, your son it's going to take a long time to break him away from the beige diet. Well, they just told us that. We're Giant Eagle here in Pittsburgh. And he goes, Dad, what is that? I said, it's sushi. And he goes, Suki? That was his big term for it. I go, sushi. I go, buddy, you're not going to like this. It has multiple textures. He goes, can we get it? We ended up going home with a California roll, and I sat and watched him devour the entire thing. So when we went back, they were like, you've got to be kidding me. So they kind of started with sushi as therapy. And we built up, so food therapy was another. We had music therapy. We have Wesley Wonder Kids here locally in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. They are exceptional. We did music therapy. The other thing we had here, there was essentially socialization therapy called Wonder Kids. And what I loved about Wonder Kids, they would put Gus in with kids his age that were on the spectrum. They would help them in socialization, grade them socializing. So you would show up as a parent and go, this is great. Gus went from 2 to 3 interactions. He did this, and this is what I think we have to work on. And whatever they told us he had to work on, I would definitely do that. And the one thing I will tell you in terms of dad therapy, I took my sons everywhere. Like I deal with a lot of parents with children on the spectrum here in the greater Pittsburgh area. I helped found an organization called PALS here in North Fayette Township for special needs children. And then I'm on the board of directors for the Caring Center. And I have a lot of parents I feel that want to sequester their child and, and just keep them in all day. And my advice is no, regardless of where they're at on the spectrum, get them out, because every interaction to me was therapy. So I would always do that. I talked about the play set in the back. That turned out to be worth every penny. Every child in my neighborhood grew up on that. My son graduated with 8 other boys up and down the block. They were like a rat pack. They ended up playing all basketball in front of the house eventually. And that was therapy. He'd be out with those kids all the time. And it wasn't always perfect. And if I saw something, I would go over and go, hey, we could have done this differently, or you could have said this to Jackson because he said something to you, or Parker said this to you. So that was all the initial therapy, but it was hours. I mean, and the other thing I want to your listeners to keep in mind, my son, we discovered, couldn't hear out his right ear. He also has Tourette syndrome. I thought he was stimming. And I apologize, I can't recall the exact age, but we kept hearing these guttural noises. And I thought, what is he doing? And then this giant epiphany one day, I kept yelling at him, trying to correct him like a behavioral modification therapy. Then I saw his neck flexing. And one of my best friends, John, has Tourette's. And I went, oh my, I think he has Tourette's. And I went, I'll never forget this moment. And I grabbed him and I said, Gussie, can you control those noises? He goes, no, Daddy, I can't. And I went, oh my. So, on top of all the other therapy, we had to trip the neurologist for Tourette's. Then we find out he can't hear. Then, if I may add, I'm cognizant the worst thing you could give a child on the spectrum is inordinate amounts of steroids, antibiotics. They destroy all the gut flora. I know all this, but he was sick all the time, as was my youngest son Max. And we found out after rigorous trials that they have primary ciliary dyskinesia, which is where the cilia in the lungs that would typically move out particulates, an infection, theirs move slow, significantly slow. So we had to get them on breathing treatments. That was a game changer. We went from being sick consistently to me. I remember one day looking at my wife going, when's the last time you've been to a doctor? It was an amazing epiphany because it works synergistically with all of the therapies we were doing to build his immune system. We went from a sickly child to a vibrant, healthy child. And if they're vibrant and healthy neurologically, they're functioning a lot better. And keep in mind, you're trying to reduce the gluten, the casein, all that as well, which plays into neurological function. So we went through a lot. I mean, I gave you a long answer, but we had quite a bit of therapy going on top of the additional ailments that we found.
For the Tourette syndrome, I do have a question because we've started to question that with our son, and I have a lot of other members in our organization that have also questioned Tourette's, but our children are below the age of 10. So did a neurologist have to diagnose that?
Absolutely. And here in Pittsburgh, we have Dr. Robin Philippink, who's absolutely phenomenal. But usually you have to go through the neurologist. And from there, he's on the name of the drug is escaping me right now, but it's a very light drug to help calm the system down. So help the tics. He also does a lot of magnesium. But my advice would be absolutely go see a neurologist. And there are some that specialize in Tourette's. Those are the people I would go to. I give him a lot of credit. He is a tough. Yeah, my youngest son is 195 pounds of pure muscle that could bench press 300 plus pounds. He's a football player. But my oldest son is equally as tough. When you look at everything Gus has gone through, from the ear to the Tourette's to autism to everything else, he never complains. He just charges through and perseveres. And I give him a lot of credit.
Yeah, he definitely sounds like a resilient guy for sure.
And,
So,
and I should note, if it wasn't for him, my book wouldn't be. This book has gone international. I hear from people around the world, and he won a Courage Award this year, an international Courage Award. And what happened was the president or the founder of the Lukumi Make a Difference Foundation, which is about anyone 21 or really under making a difference in the world, heard the story. But I had stated to him, I said, listen, we're going to open up our life to the world. And if you don't want me to do that, we stop right here. Because I had the outline of my book. And I said, you let me know what you think. And about 10 minutes later, he walked in, he looked at me and he said, Dad, if it'll help just one person, we got to do it. And he heard that story, and Gus ended up winning a Courage Award. So he's a very, very great young man. Very proud of him.
that's awesome. Yeah, I would be too. That's amazing. Harry, I really want to hear more about your book. But before we jump into that, I'm going to take a real quick break so that we can hear a word from our sponsors. Unpuzzled Parents Connect was built on a foundation of two parents who were struggling. Imagine facing the challenges of parenting a child with autism without support, without answers, and without a community. That's the reality for too many families across West Virginia and the Mid-Ohio Valley. And that's exactly why Unpuzzled Parents Connect exists. We walk alongside the caregivers, offering guidance, emotional support, practical tools through our support groups, counseling sessions, and educational workshops. When families connect, everything changes. Isolation turns into understanding, and chaos gives way to hope. Your donation brings that hope to life. It helps us reach more families, expand vital programs, and ensure that no parent feels invisible or alone. Give today. Be the reason that a family finds strength, community, and peace of mind. For more information on our mission, you can visit our website at unpuzzledparentsconnect.com, where you can follow us on Facebook. You can help us continue the work that changes lives one family at a time. Thank you so much for giving, and thank you so much for supporting us. So, going back to the book, you credit a lot of this to your wife. And I'm sure, just knowing my own personal journey and what my husband and I have gone through, having a child, not just on the spectrum, but with a disability, can be so challenging on a marriage. How did you guys really learn to not just co parent, but become great teammates in this journey and through this process?
When you especially back then when we were diagnosed, I like to say we were on an island. I think everybody has felt that, right? So to give you perspective, and this does relate to your question, we have a neighborhood of jocks. We have, my neighbor Jackson is going to be a starter for Duquesne soccer this year. We had the Dragons. We had two young men down the street, both played for Duquesne. One ended up playing professionally. We had football players. So while they were talking about going to games, we were talking about going to therapy. So at the end of the day, I think as a husband and wife, you look at each other and realize we got. You know what I mean? We are our team. And I don't want to make I want to say, if anybody has seen my big fat Greek wedding, you'll know my life. Okay. I had a very close family. They were all on board. We had close friends that were on board. But ultimately, the people that are running them to therapy, dealing with the meltdowns, dealing with the long nights when they can't sleep, it's you and your wife. My wife and I like to kayak. And if you put us on a single kayak, we're phenomenal. We're really good about maneuvering. We decided a few years ago on vacation to go on a tandem kayak. And the people that were with us on the tour group were kind of heckling us. So we didn't know why. And we're like, oh, we got this. And Michelle would row and it would go right. And I would row and it would go left. And it was maddening. And I joke around, there were a lot of obscenities that were thrown out. But towards the latter half of the trip, we start getting it down. And we start getting it down. It was exhilarating. The kayak jettisoned in unison. And that's the example you should be using for parents of children on the autism spectrum. When you synergistically work together, things happen. That you eliminate that chaos. Now, were there arguments at times? Of course, there were. You're always going to have some disagreements, but I think ultimately what it does is unify a couple. And it's sad. I know that the divorce rates are high within, and I think a lot of that comes down to one belligerent parent. And I've seen both. I've seen mothers and I've seen fathers that simply won't jump on board. But for us, it was unifying in that we knew that, every day we're going to have to work this together. If she's tired, I'm going to be tired. I think of my son, who's a football player. It would be 100-degree days here in Pittsburgh in the summer, and they would all be getting up at 6 a.m, the team. But they would talk about it and go, we suffer together as a brotherhood. This isn't fun getting up at 6 a.m, but we're there lifting, we're there on the field. It's no different. If my wife and I were exhausted, we could at least look at each other, know what we've been through the night before. So it really brought us together. But again, she really is a hero in the book because she fought through everything. And where I'm really lucky when it comes to my wife, she's a nurse and she is like incredible. We were cleaning out a room the other day. Keep in mind, my son is 21 now. We're keeping all of it. We found his supplementation regimen and she had it down to the hour, like Excel spreadsheet. It was like this big. And looking back, we went, oh my, how did we do this? But the beauty, we did it together. We suffered together. We went through it together. Literally, he had at one point an hour by hour supplementation schedule. Because I think a lot of people can relate to this. These aren't one and done. Some of these you have to take throughout the day and dose throughout the day, things like that. So it really did bring us together. And I think you need that unity. You have to for your child or children that might be on the spectrum.
Oh, for sure. You have to have that teamwork. And I've talked with so many parents that like you said, we are all that we have.
Right.
And if we can't do this together, then we know that we're not setting him up for success. I mean, obviously every family wants that amazing marriage and we want to do it for our children, but most importantly, we have to be able to get through the hard times together. And I'm so glad that you said that because there are struggles and we see it all the time. And I'm sure you do too with families that are either having disagreements or just really going through the day-to-day changes and the lack of date nights and the alone time or just time together that you thought you were going to have, the lack of vacations and the way that you thought your story was going to be wrote is now just completely different in a whole new language and sometimes feeling like you're on a completely different island. So I'm glad that you brought that up. What about a simple practice that you can take from your book that you would advise for fathers moving
Okay.
forward?
Well, the one, so, and what I try to do in my book was simply disseminate very simplistic ideas that would translate to helping their children. Okay. And a lot of it's mental construct. But the one that has resonated the most is what I call my 2% rule in my book. And I, again, extracted that. I thought about when I was a white belt and you go in and you're throwing a punch in martial arts, right? So you might extend your arm. And then when you learn is progressively over time, no, I start getting my hips into it. And then you get to the black belt level and you realize it originates from your feet. You can triple the strength of your punch. You start from your feet, you're rotating your hips, you're protruding the right knuckles. And then even at a black belt level, you're getting critique. So the point being, every class, you're getting progressively better. So when I talk about my 2% rule, I woke up the one day and we talked about the cacophony that was going on in the house, right? So I had a therapist going, you need to work on this, this, and this. I would have my wife going, I observed Gus with a peer outside and he didn't do this. And you have all this going on. And it was, you get so overwhelmed, you can almost do nothing. It's almost like putting a weight over your shoulders. Then one day I realized I'm gonna really apply this like a martial artist. I'm gonna work on one thing today, one thing. I'm gonna pick it today and make my son 2% better. If it's we talk about beige food, we're gonna try a new food with a different flavor texture. We're gonna try something, and what it did is just eliminate the cacophony. We focused in on that win for the day. And if we had other wins on top of that, that's kind of like a cherry on the sundae, if you follow me. And that can happen. You might have multiple. But I knew going in, I'm working on socialization. I'm working on this. I'm working on that. And those little wins truly add up over time. So I talk about it in my book. Anyone that's read James Clear's Atomic Habits, which is one of the top 20 books out there now, my 2% rules like essentially Atomic Habits on steroids. Going in and going, no, I'm going to stop. I'm going to cut all the clutter out. And this is what I'm going to work on today. And just pick that one thing. And I found that it really, really helped. It made me feel like I accomplished something as a father. And it also made me feel better knowing that over time, seeing those gradual improvements with my son was great. And like I said, there were days where I would knock it out of the park. We'd accomplish the one task I wanted. I start feeling he was getting better at something, and we move on to something else. But that 2% rule has really resonated. The other thing I'll mention to your listeners is both, I have a chapter on sight and vision. So the sight is that 2% rule. I'm going to get up every day. I'm going to grind. I'm going to help my son. I'm going to listen to the therapist, see what they say. I'm going to go from there. Vision piece is understanding where, and I think it's critical with a child on the spectrum or a young adult, where are they in 5 years? Where are they in 10 years? And that vision piece can change. So I talk about the vision piece in some of my speeches. We were thinking that he wouldn't be able to go to college in middle school. It didn't look like that was in the works. We discover brain balance. All of a sudden, he's advocating for himself. His grades go up. The teachers can't believe the difference. And we shifted the vision piece. And we said, well, you know what? I think we could pull this off now. I think he could go to college. Academically, he was fighting for himself. He was doing well. And that vision piece changed. So I would say if you pull two nuggets from the book, one is the 2% rule, getting up every day and trying to focus on one item and just charge it to get that child better. And the other is always having in mind sight and vision. Sight is the daily grind. Vision is what do we need to do? And I'm cognizant that my son was more on the mild end. I think they call it level one now. I'm getting used to the new terminology. And if you have a child that's more moderate, severe to severe, that vision piece might look differently. They're going to need assistance. You might not be around all the time. You know what I mean? They're going to need some source of income. They're going to need a helper. They may need a home, things like that. So the vision could be a little bit different, but you still need to have it at the end of the day. And I have had at fundraisers, people come up and go, you're right about your 2% rule, but my child isn't your child. Mine's a little more severe. And I stop them and go, you can't think that myopically. Just because your child may be more moderate or moderate severe, their win is still a win. It might look different than my son. I had one father that was very frustrated because their son was nonverbal, and then they discovered the electric device where you could type in and speak. And I looked at him and I said, "How brilliant is this? You didn't think it had any improvement. Your son has a voice now. I could hear it. Like, when he types it in, they're able to communicate. That's huge. So never give up hope." And those are the two things I think that have really resonated with the readers. I try to give what I wanted was just simple, practical advice on top of some motivation.
I think positivity really affects everyone also. That positive mindset we talk about, my husband and I talk to a lot of families about the positive parenting methods and or gentle parenting. I mean, there's so many different labels that are given for it, but we really, really took on with positive parenting and over praising Connor for everything because it really did make a huge difference in his attitude and in the way that he wanted to participate. He has a very broad vocabulary, loves to script, but more importantly, he loves positive praise. And that is something that for us, we felt like we were positive people. Also, like you, a type A, very strict in our mindset. We came from the auto background, so we had a very tight schedule. And when Connor's diagnosis happened, we had to change quite a bit. But the biggest thing for us was if we could keep that positive mindset and really have that positive parenting style, everything changed for him. I mean, not, I wouldn't say that we jumped levels by any means, but the milestones and the goal setting shifted. And I do agree that that 2% will impact everyone no matter what section of the spectrum that their child happens to fall. Because if you can keep that positivity in the front and those little goals set, I think you're 100% right that it will change their life and your perspective and how you're able to cope and parent. And it just comes full circle, really.
I love what you just said. And let me emphasize. So if you think I don't believe it, I'm saying the power of hope and positivity is on the cover of my book. And what the example that I use in my book is the Ted Lasso effect. Because Ted Lasso was a show that was a paradigm shift. It provided a cultural shift, which you don't see often with a TV show. And for anyone that's never watched it, they hire what they think is a horrible coach for this professional soccer team in the UK. And through nothing but empathy and positivity, he not only transforms this vagabond team of miscreants, but he actually transforms the community. And it has been a paradigm shift for parenting, leadership, coaching. So, my book is about hope, positivity, grit, and resilience. And those are the themes. But in particular, when I talk about positivity, think about your child's journey and what they're going through and the struggles. I look at my son Gus compared to his peers. His peers could go kick some ball, joke around, run around. He couldn't do any of that. And the last thing your child needs is negativity. Period. You should be a beacon of light in your house. And I love what you said about praising him. I have heard now from fathers around the world. I actually had a father from New Zealand, if you could believe this, message me and go, "How do I build up his esteem? What do I said, praise. Praise. When he does something well, jump on it, leap on it. Because if he does something well, then what you've done now, little old style neuralistic programming, but you've wedged that in his brain. In other words, you pinned it. Oh my gosh, I did this well. Dad praised me or mom praised me. Now I can move on. So it's so important to wake up. And everybody has a bad day. I always get that once in a while. People go, "Don't you have a bad day?" I do have a bad day, but my steady state is upbeat positivity. And I never that when my son walked out of the house, he had enough. It was tough interacting with peers. He had sensory issues. There's enough there to frustrate him. He doesn't need it from me or my wife. So I wanted to keep a very big air of positivity. And let me say this: when you're building your village, and your village could be you, your spouse, cousins, uncles, aunts, grandparents. If there is anyone that isn't on board, I don't want to say cut them out, but they're going to be pushed back in the decision making tree and all of this. And we dealt with that, and it could be very frustrating, and you just want to keep moving forward with a very positive, uplifting team. So I think that's absolutely critical. I'm glad you said it. It was a perfect segue for me. And I'm hoping that anyone listening to this, it really resonates with them.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel the same way. And I know within our organization, we've talked about boundary setting within families, friends, coworkers, managers. Everyone will have an opinion. There's going to be a lot of different tunnel vision for some and unsolicited advice that you're going to receive. And you're still going to have people that are just not walking our path. So, the outpouring advice is your judgment to kind of block out, but also, like you said, kind of push those people to the side, love them from a distance, if you will.
That's a
And
great
it's
way to put it.
hard.
Right,
It
right.
is hard. We hear it all the time that families are just not as accepting. The older generation says that they didn't have autism when they were younger, and you'll hear it in the media, autism's on the rise, and this is happening, and that is, and there's always something to blame, and it's difficult, no doubt. But if we can keep that positivity, and if we can start learning how to manage those boundaries, then there's going to be a paradigm shift in your life, or at least in your bubble, your village, and it's just going to help your kids moving forward. In your opinion, what bit of advice could you give to new families who just received that autism diagnosis for their child?
So the first, this is a great question, and I've thought about this introspectively a lot. And this is more psychological, but if I could go back, wow, now 20 years ago, I would have this Harry grab that Harry and look him in the eye and go, "It's going to be okay." And when you first, I have been in your shoes. If you're listening to this today and you just received a diagnosis, I have been in your shoes. I understand it. And you feel like the world's falling apart. You're trying to deal with so many different emotions. Understand something right now. Um, Advances in autism have come quite far, significantly further than when my son was diagnosed. There's an abundance of resources, information, things like that. My overall message: it'll be okay. Don't, just take a breath. Your world isn't coming over. The other thing I will tell you is, I say this a lot. I'm Greek Orthodox. I have a quiet but strong faith. I have my cross here underneath my shirt. God doesn't make mistakes. I want them to understand this very firmly. God doesn't make mistakes. He chose you. He God saw something within you and realizes how strong you are, how resilient you are, and he chose you and gave you your child, a blessing. It's still your child. You could still take it out and play with it. You could go, do everything else. So just understand, relax, stay calm. That would be number one. And understand that God doesn't make a mistake, and that child was given to you for a reason because he knows that you're exceptional and you're going to do everything you can to help that child. Then the other thing I would just say after that is immersing yourself with knowledge. And back in the day, the first book I ever read, and I'm probably not the only one to say this, is Taylor Grandin, um, uh,
Temple.
Temple. Jeez, I apologize. I have Temple Grandin. It's early. I remember reading her book. I ran out immediately to Barnes and Noble and bought every book they had at the time on autism. Um, Now there's an abundance. And what I like is back then all you had was Temple Grandin, and then you had a lot of very thick how-to manuals, for lack of a better term. Now you have a Mount Rushmore of mothers. And there is now being a niche filled by fathers. And so, go out, immerse yourself, do as much reading as you can, because what that's going to do, set up the plate to help you move forward and help improve your child. Now, obviously, you're going to find therapy for your child. You're going to find a neurodevelopmental specialist. If you don't have one in your area, you can still establish your child with someone and potentially have to go through Zoom. But start that process. But the key to me is starting with the right mindset. So understand that you're going to be okay. I promise you, you're going to be okay. Everything's going to calm down. And second of all, you were chosen by God for this mission, and relish it. Love your child, treat your child no differently than any your other siblings, and move from there. And that would be my advice. I know it's not easy. I've been there. It's tough, and I talk to newly diagnosed parents all the time. And sometimes you just want that hug, and they physically want that hug, and it's just a talking to. And I'm glad I could do it on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And I think to go even further, it's okay to not not make mistakes, but I know that you said in the beginning that you guys invested a lot of money in something that didn't work out. We went through the same thing. And when you are a new parent, you are overwhelmed, especially now with all the media, research, social media, unsolicited advice. There's so many things that you'll hear at the very beginning that's overwhelming. If
Right.
you try something and don't like it, it doesn't mean that we fail as parents. It just means that we learned a lesson, move forward, and just take it as that. It's just a lesson. But we were in a very similar situation to what you described. And looking back, immediately at the time, it was like, oh my God, I can't believe we did this. We wasted a year. We wasted so much money, so much time. And who knows what could have happened. But now looking back years later, I'm going, okay, that's all right. We were just new. We didn't know what was going to work for him. And we still don't know what's going to work for Connor. We're still the rest of his life, we are going to be in trial and error. And what works for my son may not work for the next. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily right or wrong. And I am hoping, like you said, we're going to have so many more progressions with new medicines and with new therapies that come out that, one day we can be looking forward to that vision of college or wherever life takes us. But learning those lessons, accepting them, and not taking them as failures, I think will be huge, in my opinion, for new families that are just stepping into this world.
Absolutely. When I say advances have been made, there are significant advances being made at the moment. But to your point, the road, the path on your journey won't be flawless. You're going to have some stumbles, things like that. The point being, keep going, keep trying. I mentioned this before, and I'm just trying to beat that to death. But my son again will be graduating in a year. A year ago, we were looking at a new modality that worked, and if I find another one tomorrow, you better believe we'll be trying it. So you just want to keep progressively trying things, and some have worked and some haven't.
Yeah, I agree. Harry, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the work that you are doing, the work that you're going to continue doing. I have enjoyed following you from a distance and following your journey, your path. Your book was wonderful. I enjoyed reading it. I know my husband's enjoying it as well. And I just really appreciate the work that you're doing, not just for the community, but for all of these dads out there that are so nervous and really just not knowing what to expect. I really appreciate the fact that you're shedding the light and giving a different outlook on this journey. And it's so important. And your son is amazing. What an amazing story. And I'm going to be cheering for you so hard as you guys grow. And especially, from one nonprofit to another, I know how impactful this work is. And I appreciate all that you do.
Thank you so much. You're given one chance in life to help others, and in Greek, the concept that we have is called philotimo. It's good for the sake of doing good with asking nothing in return. And I want to spread philotimo around the world. I want to help as many people as I can. I don't think there are enough male voices in this space, and I want to fill that gap. So it's been an honor to be on here. And I will say this to anyone listening. I am the most approachable guy on the planet. I'm available, you can find me everywhere. Just reach out at any time, connect with me, and it'd be an honor to meet some of your listeners as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. It was great talking with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. To learn more about our mission, the work we're doing, and upcoming events, please visit our website at unpuzzledparentsconnect.com or follow us on Facebook at Unpuzzled Parents Connect. Your support makes a difference. Consider making a donation to help us empower families and build community. Until next time, stay strong, stay connected, and stay unpuzzled.